This is Keys to the Shop, episode 358, Transforming Coffee Through Proportional Pricing with Andy and Nanelle Newbom of Torque Coffee. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. I'm your host for the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. It would be amazing if you would subscribe to the show. Just hit that button wherever you're getting your podcast right now, and also share these episodes with a friend or with your coworkers and team. That's a great way to get the word out about Keys to the Shop. Now, one of the things that I love to offer to you on top of this podcast is consulting and coaching through Keys to the Shop Consulting. This is where you get to work directly with me to help you as an advisor along the path of opening your first coffee shop, or if you already have a coffee shop but need coaching in some critical decisions or projects, whether that's scaling your business, revamping systems, assessing your operations in person, or barista training. There's lots of ways that we can work together either remotely or in person to make a big difference in your coffee business. I would love to have a conversation with you about that. If you are interested in setting up a free discovery call with me, just email chris@keystotheshop.com and we can get on the phone and have a great chat about what you have going on and how Keys to the Shop Consulting can help you. Again, that email for Keys to the Shop Consulting, chris@keystotheshop.com. Now, if you're listening to this podcast, obviously you love coffee. And one of the ways that we love to enjoy coffee, including pour-over coffee, is well-executed batch brew coffee. We've seen how people can really get great coffee from these machines, much maligned in the past years of specialty coffee. We have since learned from our ways, but we've still been limited by the technology, the traditional technology of batch brewers, until the ground control Cyclops brewer came around. The folks at Voga Coffee are responsible for revolutionizing the batch brew industry with this piece of equipment that, through its SCA award-winning technology, allows you to control, that's why it's called ground control, right? Control the extraction of an incredible range of flavors that previously were not really able to be extracted as efficiently, as consistently. It really elevates your coffee to a whole nother level, changing the game again for batch brew coffee. But it's not just a batch brewer. It also can make tea, batch diced lattes, batch cold brew, increases the efficiency of your coffee bar, and exponentially increases the possibilities of what you can do with your menu with a small footprint, and it's easy to train your staff on too. So if you're looking to upgrade your quality, increase efficiency, and look really good doing it, by the way, then I think you should definitely think about getting a ground control Cyclops brewer for your store. Go check them out over at groundcontrol.coffee. Now, one of the conversations we always have to have is on the subject of what to serve our customers who need something besides regular dairy milk. They want a plant-based option, but they don't want to sacrifice quality because they know you put so much work into the craft of your coffee, and they want something that's going to really come alongside that coffee and let it shine. And because of that, I think the best option is the Barista Series from Pacific. The Barista Series was created for baristas and with an incredible amount of feedback from professional baristas all over the world before any of the products ever hit the market. So you know it will actually perform on bar very well, standing up to the heat from steaming, producing amazing texture for latte art, and also keeping the balance focused on the coffee. So the coffee is the star, and your plant-based customers are super pleased. Go check them out over at pacificfoodservice.com to learn more information and get samples. Try it for yourself. If you're looking for the best out there in plant-based beverages, I think it really does have to be the Barista Series from Pacific. Okay, everyone. Well, today I am really pleased to welcome to the show two people that have been instrumental in the coffee industry for over 20 years. Andy and Nanelle Newbom of Torque Coffee. They both have been lifelong coffee professionals, over 2 decades of working as foundational members of the third wave of specialty coffee. Andy and Nanelle founded Barefoot Coffee Roasters in California, which was one of the first companies to pioneer direct trade coffee relationships. Andy was one of the founding members of the Barista Guild back in the day, and like I said, for over 20 years, they have been involved in both the retail, roasting, importing, building relationships and advocating for equity in the coffee supply chain through everything that they do. Nanelle currently is working at Equal Exchange, and they both have founded this new company, Torque Coffee, which introduces the idea of proportional pricing as a way of bringing equity to the supply chain in hopes that it will be a practice that spreads and transforms the way that value is distributed to farmers. They have been advocating and working within systems to try to create equity within the supply chain, and they've been holding this tension their whole career to really make a sustainable difference in the way that value is distributed. Torque is a really interesting model through its proportional pricing, and today's conversation is going to be focusing on talking about what about the supply chain in particular is this addressing, how it's different than what's currently out there, and the philosophy they have about delivering value to the farmer, and practical steps about how to integrate proportional pricing into your current model as well. So I hope that today's conversation is informative, inspiring, and that you get a lot out of it. Here now is my interview with Andy and Nanelle Newbom. Okay, Andy, Nanelle, thank you so much for being guests on the show.
It's awesome to be here.
Thank you for having us. Yeah.
Well, I have known, especially you, Andy, and Nanelle, you and I have met on occasion, I believe. But Andy, I see you all over the place at trade shows a lot more. But you're both just long-term coffee industry folks that have done such a world of good in your long careers in coffee. And I'm really excited to have a conversation about your current project. But I wanted to kind of start from, you can kind of take turns telling us a little bit about the story of your journey in coffee and how it's led you to this particular project, because, this is solving a problem that has been something you've observed throughout your entire coffee career. So let's start there and talk about how this has developed for you.
No big pressure, right? Just
No.
Explain how you got to, something over 20 years.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I guess I'll start. First of all, was it 2000? Yeah, 2000. Nanelle liked coffee and I didn't, because coffee's, disgusting most of the time, right? So, when I had an amazing espresso that just kind of completely changed my life, and I was like, I need to make this. And then that kind of like led us down the path of craziness. We did Barefoot Coffee Roasters and a ton of things after that. We pioneered, I guess, early group into direct trade. So from the first trip I know I did to Origin, which is to Guatemala with Edwin Martinez at Finca Hermosa, I pretty much came away with coffee's too cheap. Like I was just watching people climb, 60-degree slopes in ballet slippers, carrying, 30, 40 kilos of cherries. I was like, all right, this whole thing is like crazy. So that sort of stuck with me, trying to sort of how do you solve that, from end to end, hits and misses and ins and outs. That's kind of been, I think, the driving thing. Plus, as I always quote, because I quote Edwin on this one, every coffee has a home. So trying to find, homes for every coffee has kind of always been one of our focuses, even though we tended to be on the, quote, high end or specialty end. But figuring out how to make that work for every player in the chain has been one of our, I looking back now, I realize that's been one of our passions the whole time. So
from my perspective, I've always been interested in coffee, but also interested in equity, justice, and basically respect. Sort of wanted to have this idea of being sort of a justice warrior, but we don't really, as individuals, normally have really the tools for that job. But having worked in coffee as an employer and as an employee in a full range of positions, for me, I've always struggled with the kind of multiple questions about how income is assigned, and how it's distributed in general. I've been a female employee in the private sector and have grown to sort of expect, for example, that I would just make less than my male counterparts. but I've also seen similar struggles in other people from multiple different directions. For example, like with Barefoot, I was an owner and an employer of others, and I did struggle with how do you make things work so that everyone has a voice, from the producers to the employees, all the way to the customers, really, and still have the ability to grow. Put it together, there's a lot of questions there about how do you make that happen. So having worked as a manager in positions also where those forms of equity were not really a goal or a concern has always been a challenge, because I've both worked in my own businesses and for other people. Now I actually work with Equal Exchange, where it's a worker-owned cooperative in a system that accomplishes many elements of equity. No system is perfect, but it's really great to work there and to experience a cooperative system in that context. It really sort of informs. I've kind of learned a lot about thinking how to make things more equal. Anyway, through those kind of a range of experience, it's brought me to a point of wanting to partner with Andy on his big idea of using just a portion rather than a number. I thought that was really cool and really interesting, as a way of sort of addressing some elements of inequity, and also really sourcing amazing coffees, which is always super fun to do. Sort of makes it a loop where we all rise and fall together. And sort of, I feel like my career and my history of just always sort of being concerned with equity and justice sort of brought me to really wanting to work with him on this.
When I hear you both talking about this issue and the impetus behind Torque, and how it's always been something that has motivated you with how you've operated in the coffee world, and I guess as people as well. The industry has a lot of people who are concerned about the same things. However, I think there's also this truth that the industry allows us to sort of take those concerns and put them in a particular bucket so that the tension of those concerns doesn't interfere with the industry of our, you know what I mean? The industriousness of our businesses. And it's, right. I don't want to say the word frustrating, but I guess it is frustrating to have a business and be a roaster, own a coffee shop or whatever it is, importing company, and know that there are still these problems that you're slowly chipping away at, and that tension is just always there, being like, if you just took this ibuprofen, you just get rid of this pain of knowing right. that you're not as effective as you could be. But what I like about what you're doing, all that to say, is that you're continually trying to iterate on solutions and not just trying to pass the buck to somebody else, but you're always trying to find ways to relieve that tension in a sustainable way. So as you've seen this ebb and flow of issue with equity and the financial burden on farmers, et cetera, what would you say are like the headline issues that are in the way of farmers getting sustainable streams of value for their product? Because we have had so many, we do have so many organizations and efforts and programs, and yet certain things persist. How could you describe that for us?
For me, I think it's a really fundamental issue that goes beyond the specifics of numbers and systems. I think it's really a set of double standards that all of us in specialty coffee, we sort of wittingly or unwittingly embrace or even champion in some cases. The double standards sort of create this imbalance that prevents equilibrium, and it sort of like leaches value from people at one end of the chain and transfers it to the consuming side. In specialty coffee, there's a lot of movement towards like breaking coffee free from the commodity market, for example. Direct traders are all about that, and paying more, and even partnering in a really great way. Collectively, we've made amazing progress in pockets. It's like pocketed progress in creating new standards and new values. But really the entire industry is built on a set of double standards where we expect one side basically to fulfill a set of promises and don't expect the same from the other, and we sort of flip it when it comes to income, where it's the other way around, where it's expect to filter backwards, sort of. These standards are kind of sort of like applied both to the scale and the manner of distribution of value. So despite our genuine interest in a more equitable exchange with producers, consuming countries, we have controls, like the C market controls one side of the income, but it does not control the price at retail. So on one hand, you have a pricing structure or a pricing structure that's tied directly to a market that can be manipulated by people motivated to extract the maximum amount of value from that part. And on the other, you have a roaster can charge whatever they want to put a coffee on the shelf. That's a decision that's detached from any outside controls. And I think it's that double standard that really is at the core of the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think, speaking on that, I mean, I think we've, and when I say we, I mean the entire coffee industry and specialty coffee, kind of, in particular, we've still basically left the who distributes value and who decides value up to the commodities market. I mean, we can all say that we don't buy coffee based on the commodities market, and I mean, at Barefoot we bought direct trade, and I didn't even know what the commodities market was until 2008, 2009. But all pricing is all foundationally based off that floor. So, and it's, if you don't think that's true, just look at everybody's websites and everybody's reports, and what we all talk about is how much more we paid the farmer than the C price, or how much more than the fair trade floor price. And so I think that really shows our double standards, because we don't say the opposite, which is, look how much we charge 3 times more than UBAN or Folgers for our roasted coffee. I mean, people don't tend to say that. So I think that double standard is like, we want to have the floor define, basically this commodity market defines how low can the floor go. And the retail price is how high can the roof go. And, our I guess the revelation I had one day was realizing that we should be, instead of being focused on getting the floor lower, or how much above the floor are we should focus on the roof, which is the ceiling or the highest price, and then, give the producers a cut of that, which is, on roasted coffee, pretty easy. By the cup, it's a little more complicated, obviously, because there's a lot of other variables, but, a bag of roasted coffee is fundamentally the farmer's work, and the roaster does, a little bit. So, so that's, I think, unless we can break free of that double standard, and break free is partly just admitting it. We would rather pay the farmer less, and us make more. And I don't think it's a matter of paying more per se, but I do think it's connecting consumers directly to that producer thing. Where like, ooh, X% of the thing I just bought and paid for went to the farmer. I understand that. I don't care what, I don't know what your math, I don't want your transparency report, but you know what? 10%, 20%, whatever the number is a easy math. So.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to have you all break down what torque is in detail here. But before we do that, as you've been alluding to it in terms of retail coffee price, there's this psychology that goes on in specialty coffee where I think we are, as an industry compared to a commodity industry, a little bit more empathic. We tend to really care, and so you see a lot of caring happening through marketing and through different systems. But what your statement, Andy, when you just said that people would honestly, if they're honest, be fine with paying less. And I do believe that that's true in when the rubber meets the road, because this is just my theory, and I'm really interested in your idea here, that we are very nervous about our businesses in general and the sustainability of our own businesses. And if anything looks risky outside of the status quo, then it doesn't really hold water for us. And so if we can get to that ceiling and it feels a little bit painful to us, maybe it's because we don't really know, or the system is not really tight enough to give us the confidence that it's going to be okay, that we can, give that money back or charge more for the coffee and still have a thriving business. But what do you think is behind even the most caring roasteries, et cetera, sort of having in the back of their minds the idea that we're not going to go beyond a certain point? Is it just pragmatic?
Well, I think it's, and I hope that what I was saying, I wasn't trying to, impinge on anybody's ideals or morals, because obviously it's more talking from my perspective, an hour history of like, of course I don't want to pay $17 a pound green for a coffee that I sell for 20, but I think if you, one of the things it's always been interesting, both from, at Barefoot, Nanelle did a whole bunch of other, coffee companies doing retail and wholesale, is we, constantly get people, and this is on the retail side, they're saying, oh, well, I can't afford to pay, say, $10, $11, $12 a pound for wholesale coffee, because that's, quote, too expensive. And then when you do the actual spreadsheet, you find out that the cup lid and sleeve cost more than the coffee in the cup. And then probably the half and half they put in and the sugar also costs more than the coffee in the cup. And that most retailers don't actually know those costs, so they don't really have a frame to put it into. And then so the same thing happens on the roasting side. It's really hard, and there's no good answer for this probably, unless you're maybe a really good accountant, and I'm not. How do you assign all those soft costs that make up a roastery to a per pound cost? So like we think that rent and utilities and the cost of the roaster are sunk costs and therefore they don't apply. But in our model, and our model is a little different, but we apply every cost directly to each bag. Obviously, we have to average it out a little bit. So we have a much harsher, profit margin picture. But we did that so that we could ensure that we could do, a certain percentage. And in this case, we did 20%, because I'm not a good math person, but 20% of $20 is pretty easy math. So I call it American friendly math. So I think you have that, a lot of people just don't quite know where all of their costs are. So they're very nervous to, quote, assign another cost, right? And I think the other thing and I'll talk about kind of our model in a second, but I was pitching this idea at SEA to tons of roasters. Probably it's 60 roasters I talked to about it. And one guy said something really interesting. He said, oh, we could never do that because we have 34 coffees. And I said, no, you don't. He's like, no, we do. I was like, no, you don't. I bet you have 3 retail price points. And he stopped for a second. He thought, he's like, oh, we do have 3 retail price points. And I was like, right. So you only actually have 3 coffees. You have 34 different coffees to fill those price points. But in our model, you only have 3 coffees. So the way you buy now is you're buying coffee to fill a bag for a certain purpose, blend, espresso, whatever, or price point. And we don't have to decide, oh, do we take advantage of this undervalued coffee and make a huge amount of money and then make it up by, paying more for this other one and kind of balancing it out. We just go, well, can we sell it for $20? Yes or no? And is it, that's a much easier, or $16 or $14, whatever your price point is, right? So, on that side, it actually frees you up a lot to not be so micro detailed and where am I going to put this? You're like, I always say you should never buy off the cupping table. You should buy off your plan. So if you're buying off the cupping table, you're going to run into problems. If you're buying off a written plan, you should be fine.
Oh yeah, I think that importantly, reason that the plan, although this pricing structure, although it seems kind of hyper specific and it seems to be about more, it's really not. It's not about a number. It's about a percentage of. It's about really taking that plan that Andy referred to and expanding it and taking control of your coffee purchases in a more direct way with it, because you really can decide how much can we afford to pay for coffee, and then literally just pay that price for coffee because you've decided this is how much margin we're making Like say if you go back and okay, this is rent, this is gas, this is labor, all these different costs, and then you assign a specific percentage of the total retail cost and break it down that way, you can make it fit a range of different business structures. Maybe 20% is very appropriate for us. Maybe it's not appropriate for a differently structured company, but they can still, in principle, plan in a proportional distribution of the income that they're generating with the retail coffee bag. And it really is great for one objection that many people have to fair trade, which is that they say that it doesn't reward quality, that it fundamentally isn't, sort of discourages competitive development of increased quality on the green side because it pays a sort of a flat floor price. And this kind of does the opposite because it's your quality and the need for quality sort of flows with your retail pricing in a very direct way in this type of a pricing structure, which I think is kind of
Because
cool.
you're asking a question that Andy just mentioned, which is, can we charge this amount for this coffee, no matter where it's from?
Ed, yeah, exactly. You're just looking at, does it meet our quality standards? Is this the coffee for us? So people can
Hmm.
either compete to be on that table or not because it's not not the right price for them.
And you're also in what we're talking about here, I imagine, with the origins that might be typically taken advantage of in terms of the quality of the coffee being great, but the price being pretty low, and you can make a huge margin on that coffee. Or
Yeah.
coffees that might have a very unique quality on their own, they might not elicit a lot of purchases. But within this model, if you have a price point, you also have sort of a marketed category that helps people overcome their inhibitions towards certain origins too, I bet.
Really, it does. Absolutely. And, it's always been kind of apparent when you're buying green coffee that depending on where a coffee is from, that does to a certain extent dictate the price more so than the coffee, but really should it? I don't think it should. So those are really great points.
I'm interested in diving in a little deeper here. We talked about, and we heard the term proportional pricing. And now I officially just want to ask the question about torque coffees in the framework and how proportional pricing works. What is this all about?
I guess I'll start. So we haven't actually explained it, I guess. So what we do and what proportional pricing is, which is kind of a long, clunky name, but we're kind of like math geeks, I guess. So it's basically a ratio, right? So everything in coffee is based on ratios. We like ratios. Percentages are great. It's simple, easy math. So basically, what we realized was basically, my vision has always been. I guess this is something I really have realized this year, is basic. I want to break the kind of coffee supply chain, and I tried different things. I felt like it wasn't like I feel the problem with coffee and the coffee supply chain is that it's unbroken, right? So we like to think that people say it's broken, but it works exactly the way it's supposed to for exactly the one side of the chain it's supposed to work for. It's designed to screw one end into the producers and put all the benefits up the chain, and that's what it's designed to do. And that's not necessarily all bad. It's very colonial, it's very imperialistic, but it's not necessarily all bad. But we've always tried to sort of say, well, let's make the customer, the consumer, care, which is a very loaded like discussion point of like what do we want them to care about, right? And like I think what's happened in coffee, and I'd say that we've been guilty of it too, is getting them to care about crazy flavors. Basically, is what pretty much everybody cares about now, right? That's become the what people like is the crazier the flavor, then I must have it and it must be good. And then we've allowed ourselves to use words like sustainable, ethical, intentional, like words that have zero meaning and zero definition, which is the point. So what I want to do is basically connect consumers directly to producers, but I was adamant that we wouldn't use, as somebody said, which I didn't say, but kind of like producer porn. It's like, or farmer porn. It's like, look, here's farmers and cool pictures of them. And, we try to kind of avoid that. So I wanted to make it just lead with proof and kind of back with data, and then no stories, no strings, no warm fuzzies, and try just saying, we believe, and this is the core of our structure and belief, is we believe that coffee producers are due a certain portion of the full retail value of roasted coffee. Like that's the fundamental core argument. So is that 18%? Is that 20%? Is that 22%? Is it 70%? I mean, like the numbers could change depending on the coffee maybe or the market, but we feel they are due a portion of that retail value. And then what we like about the way we do our model, which is, in our case, we're doing 20% of $20 because it's really easy math. But, I've talked to other roasters who are looking at doing 15%, and they have 3 different price points. So, but what that does is if you're a consumer and you're looking at a coffee, you can read my 50-page transparency report, which we don't have those, but if I had one, you could read it and try to decipher what all these numbers mean and what FOB means and stuff. Or you can say, I paid $20 for this thing that I have in my hand. That's about all I really know. And, 20% of that went to the producer. Hey, that's $4. Oh, okay. That seems pretty good. And, they know that when they pull the trigger on that purchase, they made an impact. We don't try to make a huge amount of story about like how many people we saved or how many wells we dug, because we don't demand that producers, pay us in warm fuzzy feelings for the price we paid them. But, they can see a direct economic impact. I mean, at the end of the day, you're spending money on a bag of coffee as a consumer, and the producer is getting paid, a pile of money for a bag of coffee. So like we want that transaction to be more clear and direct. So it's, proportional to the price. So if we charge $25 for a bag of coffee, it would still be 20%. So it'd be, $5 instead of $4 to the producer. It works out to be, the math is weird in coffee. So we actually pay $4.75 a pound. Farm gate is our actual price because of the way, shrinkage and pound go up and down and all that kind of stuff. But but it's $4.75 is what we pay for a $20 340 gram bag of coffee.
Pay back to the farmer, you say?
Yeah, and so we don't pay back, we prepay. So we're small, obviously, so it's a little bit easier.
Well, technically, we pay back this first volley.
Yeah. So the first coffees we bought were spot, so we definitely paid back. I mean, I had to Venmo the producer in Colombia the money because that was the only way I could get it to him, right? So, but on all the current coffees we have, they're forward contracted. We have 4, 5, I can't remember how many. I think 4 coffees coming in. Those we did the contracts based on proportional pricing, got obviously cupped and sampled and all that stuff, and then said, okay, this one meets our standards. And then we said we need the producer to get this much of the money, $4.75 to $45, depending on how it worked. And then all the import, FOB, export, transport, all the other stuff is added on top, and it's in our contracts that way. So those are all on the water, basically, as we speak. So in a typical transaction, the importer pays that, right? And we just have written documentation that the producer got $4.75, and then each cost is broken down, which if you're a roaster, you should absolutely get as many of the costs broken out on some sort of transparency contract as you can. You will be shocked and amazed at both how much some parties charge and how little some other parties charge. So in all those extra costs. So, but it's about $1 to $1.50 a pound is what it works out to be. So that's kind of like how our model works. Or using my previous language, we basically start from the ceiling. So the retail price of coffee is the ceiling. It's the highest kind of value. So we take a percentage of that and pay the producers, and we don't care what they used to sell it for. We don't care what the C price is. It doesn't change because our retail prices, you don't see people's retail prices change very much.
Okay, so then you're prepaying this amount that you've determined is the percentage for the coffee that you're going to sell. And so if you don't sell that coffee, That's the pressure, I suppose, is that now you're on the hook to actually sell that coffee, but the risk is on you and not on the producer.
Correct.
Yes, and so I do want to clarify. I mean, for anybody who's a roaster who does lots of buying, what we mean by the reason we are emphasizing prepay is because there are some schemes out there that do sort of a give back, like if we feel good or if we achieve certain things, we'll pay you a little bit more because we underpaid you for your coffee to begin with, or because we want you to do something like, which I mean, I'm guilty. I did this before. Like, hey, can you build a school so I can have a cool story? And yes, I mean, we actually did build a school on a farm, and it worked out awesome. And they were really happy. I mean, we basically paid money back, and so I'm not dissing that. The school's still there, and they still educate all the kids.
But
so
it is
great.
sort of weird still.
But it's kind of weird, like the farmers aren't coming up to us and saying like, "Hey, so we noticed that your roasting's really inefficient, and you could pay us more if you basically just put an extra 2 kilos in each batch, and
But we're all over
and
that
then
farm thinking.
shorten the roast profile by 2 minutes. Like, we would like you to do that because we want more money, but we do that to the producers all the time, right? So if you could pick half your flowers and then use a different fertilizer, you would have a lower cost, and I could pay you even less.
Yeah, yeah. Well, okay, so let me just get in the weeds here just for a second and talk about the balance between commerce and autonomy and relationships where there are good faith relationships that do have conversations around those things. So there's exploitative relationships, of course, and I think that's what you're really talking about here. But then there's people who are just like, we're good friends. We really want to know, and those types of things. So describe maybe the balance of having that kind of a wisdom to know the difference between the two, I guess.
Well, and again, I wasn't trying to necessarily say if you're asking a producer to do certain things or helping them do certain things that you're bad. I think that's actually can be awesome. There's so many great examples of that.
That's
more
partnership in action.
Yeah, but we don't do that. Like in this model, we don't require anything. We don't require the producer to do anything besides what they already did, which is produce this amazing coffee that we cupped, chose, liked, and valued at what we feel is true value. They don't need to do anything else because they already did it.
Yes.
That's kind of our thing. So, I think there's a lot of ways you can, kind of give back. But I'll give a slight different, and I want to tell this story about the producer, but we're not going to tell the story about this producer because we don't want to tell stories. We want to basically just leave the proof. But one of the coffees we're buying, and this basically just came out after we were already decided. I mean, it made it through I think 5 rounds of cupping over a couple of weeks. And it was just our favorite. The interesting thing about this one was the producer, the main matriarch of the family group. And there's a whole bunch of kids that have like chunks of land, and they're all like everybody else in coffee for the most part. Screw coffee. You can't make any money at it. We're taking off. We want to sell it and to develop it for something else. And the matriarch wants to keep it, and so she's fighting them to sort of like let's see if we can make coffee and make money at it. So what we paid them was only 20%. I think it was 21% more than what they were selling it for. But that pure, and then we just said, well, it's worth this to us, so here's what we're paying. It's $4.75. So that meant that she now has this argument. It wasn't very many bags; it was 5 bags in our case. But now she's like, hey, look, someone values our coffee more than we valued it at, more than the market valued it at. And she's able to kind of go back and give them a cool story to sort of bolster her goal, which is to keep them growing coffee instead of developing into condos or, whatever else. So I think that's one of the things that we think is interesting about assigning the true value and then paying it versus trying to give back later if you kind of do something. And when people say, oh, I can't afford to pay that or I have to pay for it, well, really the importer's taking all the risk, right? I mean, we have a contract and we have to buy the coffee. So, but the importer's prepaying it, right? So, and then we basically pay them when it arrives. So that's how all coffee importing works. I mean, except for a few companies like Equal Exchange and stuff that prepay in advance for everything, the whole harvest. But most companies are using an importer, right? So
It's really more about a philosophy of treating everybody like adults, like equals,
yeah,
where it's a very straightforward relationship. Sometimes we can get the impression or the feeling that asking or that sort of the give back mentality is a little bit invasive or possibly a little bit colonial in that we're sort of trying to control what happens in another country based on our version of what's really necessary there or our version of what giving is. But in fact, what we're doing is taking control of their financial structures. I think that some amount of the give back mentality has been in part responsible for some of the flatness in the C price, in the focus on efficiency and cost efficiency and manipulating how, and when I say manipulating, that could be positive or negative, manipulating how
right.
how mills and how the infrastructure is set up. Sometimes it may or may not be a good thing. It could be a good or a bad thing. A lot of time it really is most motivated by getting costs down and can potentially, I'm not saying this happens all the time, but it can potentially have a net negative effect on the economy in that region, simply by the fact that you are emphasizing efficiency. It changes everyone's mindset. It changes the roaster's mindset because their price on the shelf is still going up. Their cost for the green is flat, and they're feeling good about it because they're still feeling like they're investing in origin or doing good things. And we kind of want to combat that, where if we're getting a benefit, they're getting a benefit. We're tied. I mean, Andy talked about disconnecting from the C price, but it's really about reconnecting the totality of everybody's income. It's all tied together, and everyone is treated as an equal.
I like that point, especially the idea that, it's not, the term pay to play came up to mind, but in this term, it's reverse. It's like play to pay. Like you play our game, we're going to pay you. And the value is there. Right. Like you said, they've already, grown the coffee and harvested the coffee, but we're so used to that being the, we've become blind to it as a valuable thing. And so there's always this cherry on top that makes it extra special or extra valuable, and that's when we start to get generous. And so I like the idea that no, this is just what's already valuable, and treating people as equals in lieu of them actually owning the supply chain, which is actually happening a lot more.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's reasons for that.
Well, yeah, because they're obviously getting tired of being, taken for so much money and not having control of the final products, which is why it's so encouraging to see organizations that have, representative retail and roasteries in the states that are actually owned by farmers, and then also people within the actual origin just keeping their coffee for themselves and being like, well, we don't really need you. Because our own people are drinking this coffee.
I mean, I joke that the fifth wave is going to be when producing countries no longer sell any of their coffee to anybody outside their country, or if they do, they sell it directly to them by the cup, and we're all cut out of it 100%. And I think that's going to happen much sooner than we think. It won't be 100%, of course, but all the good coffee will be sold that way probably at some point. That'll be awesome. So. But
and that's honestly what we're trying to do is to when you prepay like that, you're giving up control at that portion, again, because it's not farmer owned supply chain, it's something that you're developing. But my thought here is, or at least my assumption is, that this model, it's not just for torque. Right. It's something that, like, you want this to spread and have other people take on proportional pricing. So I guess that's my next question, which is, as people become familiar with what you're doing and they look at their own models, how do they take the first steps to start embracing and establishing proportional pricing in the same way in their roasteries?
I think so. I'll start. So, it goes back to talking to that one, medium large roaster I was talking to, and he said he had 34 coffees, and I countered saying you only have 3 coffees, and realized you only had 3 price points. Is it's those that kind of thinking basically just I call it reverse engineering the supply chain. You really, if you start at the ceiling and you look through that, it really changes your entire perspective on what you do. So thinking in terms of what are your actual retail by the pound price points, and then it can work for wholesale. It's just much more convoluted, right? Because you're selling at a wholesale price and they sell retail, but it can still work. You just have to figure out different numbers. So you start at your retail price points, and I would challenge most, probably all specialty roasters, probably have 2 or 3 price points that they sell almost all their coffees at.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, you might have a cup of excellence, or something that's like, hey, it's $100 for an ounce, but generally you're in that like $15 to $25, one or 2 price points in there. So we think that buying coffee and pricing coffee, or pricing what we pay to producers, is really complicated, and we've bought into that because of how the market values coffee, which is it pushes the floor down, right? So one of the things that's really, really different, and I'll pitch this first, but is when we buy coffee, it's a completely different process. We basically, now we have a single price point, so in general the coffee can't be more than like $6 or $7 basically a pound, because we got to pay $4.75 to the producer, and that makes it be six to $6.50. So, but other than that, we don't care what the coffee costs. It's completely immaterial to us as long as it's for that one price point below this number. So we can get a fair trade organic coffee that's only selling for for $4 ex warehouse, and another coffee that's selling for $6.05 ex warehouse, and if we feel that they both have the same value to us, we pay the same to them, and that's our current spot offering. Those prices were our current spots, but the cost now for us is the same because we're selling them the same. So it simplified how we look at coffee. We don't have to go, ooh, this one's really good, but it's 50 cents more than this one, and this one's almost as good, but it's 50 cents cheaper. So, let's buy that one. I mean, we just basically were able to go, these 2 are the best. They made it through every round of cupping as our favorites, and will hit this flavor profile type thing we're looking for, and therefore they cost the same, or we pay the same, right? So, I think once you realize that your price point at retail defines, and your flavor profile, of course, like what you're using it for, defines what you use, what coffees you need, it really opens up how you approach green coffee. And it's way less complicated than it seems. So, and then even if you have crazy expensive coffee, you're like, well, I paid $18 a pound green for this one. Sweet. Then you should be making the same margin on that coffee as you do on your cheap coffees. Most roasters don't do that, but
Yeah.
a good example of someone who does do that is Paradise. Miguel, I've talked to him a lot about this process idea, and he basically, like, you know what, I'm going to charge the same margin for all my coffees. Why should I subsidize the expensive coffees and then try to make it up on the lower cost coffees, whatever? I mean, so he's basically just going like, it's the same margin. If it cost is X, price is Y. So, which is the same as our argument. We're saying if price is Y, then cost is X. So
Yeah, and I would just basically, my view is it's pretty much the same what he said. Break down your numbers in detail, and you'll find what an appropriate percentage is for your cost structure. Every company is different. How many employees do you have? Because business people are beholden to everyone, which can be a tight spot. But if you designate what is proportionally appropriate, you'll be able to find. It might not be 20, it might be 30, it might be 5. there's really a point that you can find, because everyone already whips out their Excel sheets on a regular basis. It's just a matter of looking at it from the top down instead of the bottom up, in my opinion.
So let me ask this in terms of practical steps, where I look at my current list of coffees that I'm contracted for, and I want to start this process. It seems like you couldn't do this just retroactively with the coffees that you currently have. For one, maybe you don't have the kind of connection to the farmer that you should have to be able to pay that right up front, or retroactively to then pay ahead of time the next time. Do you just create a new category on your list of coffees where you do have the ability to, send that money, like you talked about Venmoing money? It feels like there's a lot of like relational logistics that you're going to have to do to actually make this happen without frustrating yourself by simply, having a group meeting and saying, guess what, we're doing proportional pricing, and then not,
Exactly. Yeah, it's a challenge.
Yeah, it's a challenge. So I would say one, I'll say a couple things. So there, your importers and your exporters, which are sometimes connected, but is going to basically make or break you. So through this process, we learned, some that like didn't quite want to really participate, not because they were bad, but they're like, dude, that's like, we don't have that ability. It's just too much for us, and some that were like 100%, no problem, we'll do this. So, some good shout outs. Sustainable Harvest is fantastic, and they fully support this, and they're one of our, early mentors on this idea anyway, of hashing it back and forth. They do a great job at Onyx Coffee Importers, the Guatemala guys. They'll do it as well, and they have the ability to be transparent and move money, and pay, because they know all the producers, obviously. So, if you don't have those connections, it's a little harder. But like we don't know anybody at the Fapa Cafe's co-op in Ecuador, but Sustainable Harvest does. And so we just got a contract that says they paid them, the additional money, basically. But the other thing is, just one of the things you can do is simply, like we keep saying, I mean, neither of us are accounting people or spreadsheet people, but we keep saying, hey, look at your spreadsheet. And I think most roasters don't have a spreadsheet.
I think
so they don't actually know. I know, but what I mean? Like, I know we always struggled to figure out what our costs were. And then I think we just looked at it a little bit wrong. But, if you look at what your current prices are, and you could use FOB, although FOB is pretty easy to spoof. But if you can't get to farm gate, at least use FOB and say, well, our current FOB price on coffee A is this. And we sell it for this. So what is that percentage? Like, just build a sheet that just calculates out what you currently are already doing proportionally, and then figure out a goal that you want to get to. Say it's 15% or 22% or whatever, and which coffees we have to change to get there, right? And then you might also find you're like, wow, we're really undercharging for this coffee. so
Yeah, and I would also add, as meek as it may sound, is there's always next year. Sometimes you already have a structure in place for the coming months, and because this is so relationship based, it does take time to develop those relationships. And also, really, it's a challenge as far as selecting the coffees. It's much easier to implement or define farm gate in some instances than in others. And it's easier to do that in advance than it is based on what you already have. And I'm definitely not discouraging anybody from adjusting what the producer was paid. Do it. But it's just easier in some instances to just do it going forward. Plan your next round of coffee purchases in advance. Start developing those relationships where you do have clarity and credible transparency, so that you can get it done cleanly and without too many ends to tie up.
I like that. And it's a matter of, I feel as though your examples that we mentioned in the beginning of this episode were ones of constantly nurturing the tension that is problem solving something that systemically needs to be solved in the industry. And that requires resilience and patience. It sort of flies in the face of the quick fix of, labels and just putting it in that bucket that doesn't disturb us, right? So if you're going to take something like this on, it's not just a category that you can insert into your system, but it's something that you would need to say, okay, well, we have this and we're going to commit for the long term because it's going to take some time to kind of turn the ship, especially, I guess, if you're a very well-established and sizable roaster.
On the flip side, I think you might be surprised what your current number is. I think there'll be a lot of roasters who will be like, oh, we could never do that. And then they run the math. They're like, wow, you know what? We're not that far off from what again, we use 20%. 20% doesn't work for everybody. That's not our message. Our message is that, producers are due a portion of the full retail value of coffee. And if you disagree with it, then obviously this is not for you. If you agree with that, then you figure out a percentage that works for you and your market and your business operations and kind of how you do things, right? And you have to figure out wholesale, which is it's a different animal to figure out, but we think we've kind of figured it out. So our call would be any roaster that is serious about this and wants to do it, talk to us. We would love to help you as much as we can, guide you through it. We're not trying to get money from it. We're that weird, dumb coffee people that just want to make the world better. So
nice one. And playing the coffee.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, I'm really grateful to have you both on the show today. And speaking of reaching out to you, how can people reach out and stay in touch and learn more about Torque?
Well, obviously our website is, I won't even say the www, but
you just
Torque
did.
Coffees. I know. TorqueCoffees.com. That's TORQUE coffees.com. You can send Andy at Torque Coffees or Nanelle at Torque Coffees, and her name is Nanelle. And super quick, so the reason for the name Torque is basically I love weird, deep, sciencey things. So what I wanted to do was basically bring the coffee industry into equilibrium, and the most fascinating definition of equilibrium is the amount of force. Torque is by definition in physics the amount of force it takes to achieve equilibrium around a fixed axis point. So if you want to pivot around a point, which in our case is the coffee industry, the torque is the definition of the amount of force it takes to achieve equilibrium. And so our goal is to give consumers the torque, the power to rotate and pivot around that axis and change the system so it's in equilibrium.
I really love that. And I hope that model definitely catches on with people. And I'm hoping that everyone listening to this is inspired to really take it seriously and pursue it in their own establishments. Andy, Nanelle, I really appreciate both of you. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. It was great to be here.
And thanks for doing this awesome podcast, buddy, by the way. I'm super, super, super stoked for you and can't wait to hang out again.
Okay, everyone. Well, I hope that was something that really made you think. And again, as we were talking about the practical steps that you can take with your model, every step that we can take in the direction of providing more equity and distribution of value from the benefits we see from coffee on our end and the consuming end in roasteries is a step in the right direction. And I am really thankful for folks like Andy and Nanelle for leading the charge and bringing these ideas to the industry. So thank you both, Andy and Nanelle. It was great to talk with you. And if you want more information about Torque Coffee, you can go to the website torquecoffees.com. Now, of course, one of the ways that we are inspired as an industry is by hearing ideas like this, and that happens in community, in face-to-face conversations, and there's no better place to do that than Coffee Fest trade shows. Los Angeles and Seattle are coming up this year. Go to coffeefest.com to learn more. Go down and take advantage of the latte art competitions, cold brew competition, the trade show floor, great lectures and workshops and trainings available, and a whole host of other resources to help equip you and resource you with the tools and insights that you need to succeed in specialty retail coffee. So again, hope to see you there. Check them out, coffeefest.com. And with that, everyone, that is the end of our episode today. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me. Don't forget to subscribe to Keys to the Shop, follow on Instagram at Keys to the Shop, and share these episodes. Have a great one. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.